Hello everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IAS in English. My name is Bhanwar Singh, MX NDA 115th course and qualified civil services in 2012, and I welcome you onto the platform. So if you're live, please type in the message and let me know that you're watching this session live. And once again, we'll be doing the complete The Hindu analysis, where we'll be talking about the important articles which are there in our today's The Hindu. All right, so we'll be talking about them, and just give me a second. All right. So we'll be talking about them, and if you are live, please type in the message and let me know that you're watching this session live along with me. We'll be taking the Delhi edition, and ultimately we'll be seeing that which all important articles are there in our today's session. Now, the first session, the first news that we'll be discussing is again a major geopolitical event that is unfolding in the Western Asia, and we'll be talking about the US and Iran escalation and the Strait of Hormuz crisis as well. Now, the second news that we'll be taking is the CETA between the India and the UK that had been implemented on 15th of July, and there is a complete editorial that relates to that. Then we'll be moving ahead and we'll be talking about the Parliament and the Justice Verma impeachment. Again, a very important editorial that we'll be talking about. Kundan, good morning. All right, and then we'll be moving ahead towards the recent judgment by the Supreme Court that is upon the SIR data which cannot be used for the non-poll purposes. And this again is quite important because ultimately this relates to the judgment that was passed by the Supreme Court in May 2026. Now, there is also another news that we'll be talking about, and it is the friction between the center and state over the VBSA bill or the, Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishtan bill. And again, this pertains to the federalism debate, and thereby this is quite important article that we'll be discussing. And then we'll be moving ahead towards the India Semiconductor Mission or Semicon 2.0. This is again quite important because ultimately semiconductors are quite important when it comes to the electronics, and we have launched the second phase of the semiconductor mission in India, and thereby this becomes important. And again, this is the editorial piece that we'll be talking about. Now, the next news that we'll be talking about is where the Supreme Court is examining a plea for the recognition of the intersex persons as a distinct class. And then the next news that we'll be talking about is about WICO. China has unveiled WICO, which is an AI governance model for the global south. And again, this is quite important because India was absent in the foundation of the WICO as well. So these are the important news that we'll be discussing in our today's The Hindu. But before moving ahead, it is the time for the quotes for today. Now, these are the two important quotes that you can use while you are framing your answers for the mains examination. All right, the first quote is that a tribunal that sits in judgment over someone who no longer holds the office it can take away does not do the justice. All right, it performs theatre. That is again the Hindu editorial about the Justice Verma committee that is there, and again it is quite important because this is from the editorial itself. Reshma, good morning. All right, then we have another quote that is, those who survive without slackening will see destiny retreat before them, and this quote is by Thiruvalluvar. Now, this quote is quite important because ultimately this is about the strengthening of India when it comes to the semiconductor, or even when it comes to the various you can say the various restraints that we are seeing right now. So again, India is moving towards strengthening itself in the global regime, and thereby you can use this quote while you are framing the answer related to this. All right, let's move to the first question, and we have I'm sorry, I cannot see your name. Asfars, good morning. All right, so over here this is quite important because let's move towards the first news that we have for today. But before that, let me tell you that we are ending the the admissions on 21st of July for the GS Foundation batch, that is resolution P2I, and you can enroll into the batch by using the code BRS Live that will fetch you the maximum discount. Now, the first news that we have for today is again about the geopolitical crisis that we are seeing in the West Asian region, where there had been the fresh attacks, where the US have expanded its attack or the strikes on Iran, and it has now hitting the bridges and even the energy, the sites, and a tower at the Chabahar port had been hit, and that is hours after the Trump have threatened to strike the infrastructure to pressure the Tehran on the Strait of Hormuz. Also, this is quite important because ultimately Iran have retaliated, and Iran has launched the missile attacks on US allied Qatar and the Kuwait, and there is a Kuwaiti desalination plant that is supplying 90% of the nation's drinking water that was damaged. Now, when it comes to Middle East, over there, when it comes to the oil is quite cheaper as compared to the water, and therefore when it comes to desalination plant, so there is there will be you can say the future crisis when it comes to the drinking water supply as well. So that is quite important. And there is the interim ceasefire that was agreed last month, which has actually collapsed, and ultimately we have seen that the strikes, they have killed at least 7 people in Iran's Hormozgan province as well. Now, over here, when it comes to India, so India has its strategic interest in the Chahabar port. And here, India have confirmed that the Chahabar terminal, it is developing with the Iran, it is undamaged. And ultimately, over here, it is quite important to note that India actually relies on the Strait of Hormuz for the import of the crude oil and even for the LNG and for the fertilizer as well. So this is quite important because this threatens India's import security as well when it comes to the crucial crude oil and the fertilizers also. Now, there is the collapse of the ceasefire that we have seen in the between US and Iran that have escalated the strikes once again in the West Asian region. We have seen the implication when it comes to the the start of the war between US and Iran, and the same implication will be seen in the future as well. This is quite important because ultimately the US is over here, it is moving towards the pressure campaign to force the Iran to cede the control over the Hormuz choke point, and that is why we have the fresh strikes that we can see in the region. Also, this is quite important because ultimately it will impact India. The crude price, there is the volatility that will increase, and ultimately the price of the crude oil, it will soar higher. And this will have impact on the current account deficit. It will have impact upon the import bill as well. There is the shipping insurance cost that will also increase in the region, and the Chahabar port uncertainty is also very important to note over here. All right, I'm glad one Whistle party came here and comment. I thought no one have brain in that party. I didn't get you. All right. So it is quite important over here. But at the same time, when it comes to the world, so this has a possible global recessionary shock as well, because ultimately if there will be the oil price spike, so that will lead to the recession in the whole of the globe as well. Now, this is quite important because this gives us the opportunity. The opportunity is that India can move towards the energy diversification, which we are already seeing where the crude oil, India is importing the crude oil through the US or Africa and even through Russia as well. And this is also the opportunity where we can build the strategic petroleum reserve for the future, such kind of, the threatening of the global choke point that could be there. Now, this is quite important because ultimately this also challenge the India's investment that is there in Chahabar port infrastructure, and also this is a concern for safeguarding the Indian nationals which are there in the Strait of Hormuz. We have lots of seafarers which are basically present over there, and thereby their safety is also a concern for India. Now, also, this is a concern for managing the energy import basket volatility because ultimately, even if we are moving towards diversification, the crude oil price, it will rise. So ultimately, that will lead to the import inflations, and that we have already seen. We have discussed yesterday that the CPI, it has moved upwards from 4 digit or the 4 mark, that is basically the mark that had been set by RBI. So ultimately, when it comes to the inflation, we are already seeing that the prices, they are rising, and we have seen yesterday that the CPI, it have crossed the 4 mark. And ultimately, this is quite important for India because there would be the import inflation that will or that is quite important. Now, this is quite important over here that these are the regions where you can see that there are the US bases which are there in the Middle East region. Now, over here you can see that when it comes to the Kuwait, you would have seen that the Iran is attacking Kuwaiti US bases. Why? Because ultimately when it comes to the Middle East region, we have the Kuwait where it is the, where it has more troops as compared to the complete Middle East. Now, here you can see that we have the camp Arif Jan. Also, there is Camp Buhring and even Ali Al Salem Air Base, which is located in Kuwait. Then there is Bahrain as well, that had been struck by Iran, and in Bahrain there is NSA Bahrain, which is the US base, and in Qatar as well you can see that there is Camp Sailia, and even Al Udeid Air Base is located in Qatar. So basically these are the region along with the Jordan which had been struck, and in Jordan you will find that there is Mufafak Al Salti Air Base, where we have the US troops which had been stationed. So again, this is quite important because you have to note over here, and you can see that in prelims the UPSC could ask you answers or ask you to match the US bases presence that is there in the complete Middle East. Now coming to the next news that we have for today, it is about a trade deal that actually tests India's competitive confidence. Now this is about the recent CETA, or the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement, that had been struck between the India and the UK. Now this is quite important because ultimately this had been made effective since 15th of July, and there are 99% of the India's exports by value, they will enter the UK the tariff free, alright, or duty free. There is the zero duty sectors which actually includes textiles. There is also garments, and even we have leather, the footwear, and even the marine products, the engineering products, and also the automobile or the auto components as well. Now, if you will see these sectors which are there where we have the zero duty, they are basically the labor intensive sector, and thereby this will boost the Atmanirbhar Bharat or even the Make in India campaign as well. But at the same time, when it comes to the India will be phasing down the duties which are there on the UK imports for the cars, and the import duty, it will be slashed from nearly 110, that is here right at present, and it will be slashed towards 10%. Also, when it comes to the Scotch whisky, the duty that is right now, it is 150%, that will be slashed towards 40%, and this will be in a phased manner over a decade, and these will be capped by the quotas as well. When it comes to the agreement, so there is also DCC or Double Contribution Convention, which actually had been implemented right from the 15th of July, and here it will exempt the Indian origin workers which are there in the UK from the double social security payments for up to 5 years, and this will save us estimated $600 million per year for nearly about 75,000 workers which are there in UK, and for nearly about 900 of the companies that are there. So this is quite important. Again, this is the editorial that we are talking about, and this is where you can see that after the Brexit, after basically or post-Brexit, when Britain exited the EU or the European Union, so now the Britain is seeking the new trade partners, and ultimately India is seeking the market diversification because we have seen that the US have imposed lots of tariffs as well. So therefore, India is seeking the market diversification, and the UK is also seeking to move towards the new trade partners, and thereby this is the reason why this FTA or the CETA was, it was struck in the first place. Now this is quite important because there will be export boost that we will see in textile, leather and pharma, and there will be the import side that will see the gradual auto and the whiskey liberalization as well. Now there is also the opportunity where there will be the doubling of the bilateral trade target, and the target is to double the trade to $56 billion by 2030. Even there are the generic pharmas, they will have the access to the UK's $30 billion pharma industry or the market, and it will also end the double social security burden that is there. So ultimately there is the opportunity that is there, but at the same time it is quite important that when it comes to the auto, so automobile or the car sector, the tariffs or the duties, they will be phased down. So here, Cloud Shinobi, good morning. So because the automobile sector, where the cars import duty will be slashed down, so there is where we have the domestic auto industry that must raise its competitiveness. And even it is quite important to note over here that when it comes to the free trade agreement, so the utilization rates of the free trade agreements that we have in India, so they are basically not that much higher. All right, we have lots of free trade agreements which had been signed, but at the same time we cannot capitalize the free trade agreement, and that is quite important to note over here, because ultimately we need the correction through the export awareness that is required, not just signing the deals, but also raising the awareness in the export communities. That is what the India should look towards to. Now coming to the next news, again this is the editorial that I am talking about, and it is about the Kadava synod. Now over here this is quite important because this pertains to the Justice Verma impeachment, where the Lok Sabha Speaker, he said that he will table the Judges Inquiry Committee report on Justice Yashwant Verma when the Parliament, it will reconvene on 20th of July. Now this is quite important because Justice Verma, he had already resigned with the immediate effect on 9th of April 2026 before the report was submitted on 18th of May. So this is quite important because he has already resigned, and here we are seeing that the Lok Sabha Speaker, he have said that the report, it will be tabled in the Parliament. Now this is quite important because the Parliament, it cannot proceed to debate or vote on removing a judge who has already resigned. Alright, so this is where the article, it actually compares it to Pope Stephen VI 897 CE trial of the predecessor's exhumed corpse. So over here there are the precedents that we have seen already, that when it comes to Justice P.D. Dinakaran in 2011 and even Justice Soumitra Sen, so they have in both the cases, they have resigned before the complete impeachment proceedings. They can proceed further, and ultimately that have ended the proceedings in the Parliament. So these are the important precedents that had been cited in the complete document or the article. Now this is quite important because this pertains to the various principles or the various articles which are there in the Constitution. It is about Article 124 Clause 4 and the same or the simultaneous Article 217 1B, that is for the High Court judges, where the judges, they can be removed only by the Parliament, and that is through the address of the President. That is on the grounds of only two grounds that could be taken, and that is proven misbehavior or incapacity. Now there is also the Judges Inquiry Act of 1968. It actually lays down the complete procedure where the motion, it actually enters into the Parliament. There is a motion that that is submitted or that that is presented to the Parliament, and it could be in any of the houses. Or the motion, it could exist or it could enter into any of the houses, and after the motion has been taken up by the Parliament or any of the house, so what happens is that there is an inquiry committee that is formed. Later on, the inquiry committee, it gives the report, and then there is the address to the President that is presented by the Parliament, and this has to be passed. The motion, it has to be passed by the both of the houses by the special majority, that is by 2/3 of the members which are present and voting, and that must be greater than 50% of the total strength. And then only what happens is that then only the removal or the impeachment of the judge can be done. So there is no lesser penalty that could be prescribed, no censure, no fine that could be prescribed. The only provision that is there is to remove the judge, that is present into the Constitution. Also, there is a landmark case where we have the Union of India versus Shri Gopal Chandra Mishra. That was in 1978, where the Supreme Court have laid down that a judge's resignation that is under the provision that is under the Article 217, that is Unilateral Constitutional Act. That is, it requires no acceptance by the President, and there is Article 121 as well. When it comes to Article 121, it forbids any parliamentary discussion of a judge's character or the conduct, except when actually there is a removal motion that is under the discussion. So this is quite important that ultimately the judge's conduct, it cannot be discussed in the Parliament except during the impeachment processes that are going on. And Alchemy, good morning. All right. So these are the quite important constitutional provisions that you can note over here, which are provided in our Constitution. Now this is quite important because ultimately when it comes to the Justice Verma, so there were the currency notes that were found. There was a fire that broke out, and there were the currency notes that were found or reportedly found at his house, and there was an in-house committee or the inquiry that was set up. Later on, there was resignation basically which preceded the report's completion, and that is why we are discussing this particular editorial that is there. Now over here it is quite important because if there will be this report that will be tabled in the Parliament, so it will set the precedence on the limits of the parliamentary power over the resigned judges. and ultimately it will risk the weakening of the impeachment retrospectively if allowed to proceed. Now, there is the opportunity where if this report will be tabled without any further action, so it will close the file automatically while preserving the judicial independence norms which are there. And there are the challenges as well, or the concerns as well, where it is about balancing the accountability of the judges for the alleged wrongdoing, where there is a potential criminal prosecution that can be done against the overreach into the vacated constitutional office. So when it comes to the resignation, so over here we have the ultimately the criminal laws which are there, they apply same to the impeached judge as well, and there are the other the ways or the criminal proceedings that can be initiated against the Justice Verma. But at the same time, when it comes to tabling of the report, so it should not move beyond the tabling of the report. All right. So ultimately you can table the report, and that is where we have to end the complete process. Otherwise, this will be the overreach into the vacated constitutional office that could be there. All right. And that is why this is quite important. It is important for prelims and for mains as well. Now, coming to the next news that we have, it is about Supreme Court which have opposed the use of the SIR beyond the poll purposes. Now, over here, the Supreme Court have stated that the SIR or the special intensive revision of the electoral roll is only linked to the elections. All right. So, this is quite important, where it said that it cannot be used for determination of the citizenship or to deny any of the welfare benefits which is there. Now, this is because there is a petition which had been filed against the West Bengal's, the notifications which had been issued. Now, through the notification, there were 3 separate notifications where ultimately the West Bengal government, it has linked the SIR or the, the special intensive revision or the, revision of the electoral roll for deletions or for cutting the beneficiaries from Annapurna scheme, that is a cash transfer scheme that is there under the PDS, then also the PDS, that is the public distribution system, and also to trigger the caste certification or certificate re-verification as well. Now, this is quite important over here because the Supreme Court, it has referred to its own judgment that was passed on 27th of May. Where in the Bihar SIR judgment, it has said that ultimately when it comes to the SIR, so the SIR outcomes, they cannot be used or they cannot be used to determine the citizenship, and the Election Commission is not a constitutional authority on the citizenship that is there. Now, over here, this is also quite important because when it comes to citizenship, there is obviously a kind of doubt now that there is in the minds of the citizens of India that what actually or which document actually constitutes the citizenship. Now, the court have also separately extended the Bengaluru's civil poll, deadline to December 2026, citing the SIR logistical strain, and even the Maharashtra SIR deadline or the roll revision deadline had been extended by 10 days. So again, this is quite important that when it comes to the complete news or the perspective, because we know that the SIR debates have rocked the country right from the starting of the SIR. Then we had the West Bengal election. So again, this is quite important topic for your UPSC preparation. Now, coming to the next important news that we have, it is Centre yields to Andhra Pradesh government's demand to modify the higher education bill. So we are talking about VBSA, that is Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishtan a bill that had to be introduced. It will be introduced in this monsoon session, and here what had happened was that the Education Ministry agreed to modify the bill that is there, and ultimately that was after Andhra Pradesh have objected to centralization of powers. Now, this is quite important because ultimately the centralization was over the state universities affiliated colleges. Now, there is a joint parliamentary committee that is actually reviewing the bill provisions, and it has recommended that there should be a comprehensive review of clause 47 also, which leads the centre to suspend or even supersede the Apex Regulatory Commission and its 3 of the council as well. At the same time, when it comes to Andhra Pradesh, the objection was about the clause 11 4 that actually leads the regulatory council to bypass the state universities in awarding degree granting status to the affiliated colleges. So this is quite a significant or most significant structural change that we can see in the in the bill or in the act. Now, this is quite important because there was Meghalaya suggestion as well, which was about allowing the state universities to set up the constituent colleges or off-campus centers, as per the state law, and this was also accepted, and there is a state level NOC requirement before the degree granting decisions was also added into the bill. Now this bill will be tabled in this upcoming the monsoon session that will be there. Now this is quite important because ultimately when it comes to the complete issue that is here. So this is about the federalism debate where we have entry 66. Now this entry 66 is of the union list. Now according to this entry, when it comes to the higher education, the central government, it can coordinate, and it can also supervise in the higher education into the complete system. Now that is the major problem over here, because ultimately the states, they perceive that there is an overreach of NT 66 into the state university affiliation and the degree granting processes as well. Now there is the implication where actually it could recalibrate the complete state and the center balance in the education governance nationally, and it will also set a template on how the JPC or the Joint Parliamentary Committee recommendations, it can moderate potentially the centralizing legislation. Now there are advantages of bringing the VBSA bill. Now the advantage is basically there will be the uniform standards that can actually improve the quality assurance into the complete country, and also there could be the mobility of degrees and credits nationally. So if you are there in a college that is located in suppose Karnataka, and now your parents, they are moving to Uttar Pradesh, so there could be a mobility of the degrees and credits that could be nationally, and ultimately that will have a potential advantage for the students which are studying in the higher education. Alright, but there is also the risk, and the risk is of the duplication or the procedural delays and even the administrative inefficiencies, basically, which is the stated concern by the Meghalaya, that if the approvals are overly centralized, so there could be duplication and the procedural delays that could happen in the higher education. Now when it comes to the complete perspective over here, you can see that right now there is a legacy framework for the higher education that we have in India, where we have the UGC Act that was passed in 1956, and the UGC or University Grants Commission, it is where it sets the academic standards, and also it leads to the direct funding of the higher education institutions which are there. Now there is also for the technical education, we have the AICTE Act. This was passed in 1987 for the technical and the management standards. Then we have the NCTE Act that is there in 1993. This was passed, basically, which actually leads or it leads down the standardization for the teacher training. And there is funding and regulation, which is basically handled by the single body, that is UGC or the University Grant Commission. Now when it comes to the new architecture that will be formed under the VBSA or the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishtan, so there will be a single apex body or the apex commission that will have overarching standard, it will be the overarching standard setting committee or the body that will be there. Now beyond the apex commission, there will be three of the committees that will be there. The first one will be the regulatory council, which will lead down the baseline standards and even the autonomy as well. There will be second council that will be the standards council that will lead to the learning outcomes and the curriculum. And then there will be a split mandate when we are talking about the funding as well, where there is the funding that has been separated from regulation. So right now we have the same regulator and the funding is also under the regulator, but now in the VBSA there will be separate funding and the regulation that will be there. Now coming to the next important news that we have, again this is the editorial that we are talking about, and this is about the semiconductor or semicon 2.0. Now over here we have the second phase of the India's semiconductor mission that have been launched, and there is the total 1.27 lakh crore of the outlay. Now this is far larger than the phase 1 corpus that was there, and ultimately the funding strategy or the funding model will be two-sided, where we will have the capital subsidy that will be provided, that is with a smaller government share than the phase 1s of the 50%, and there will be the manufacturing linked incentives as well that will be provided, that will be disbursed per unit once the sales will occur. Now there is also the incremental incentives which had been promised. All right, we have the incrementals also promised. Just a second. Dhara, good morning. All right, so we have the incremental incentives which had been promised for the production that will leverage the domestic capabilities and the components as well. Now, this is basically where we are aiming to deepen the complete value chain rather than just the assembly as well. Now, most of the phase 1 approved facilities, this is quite important to note over here, that when it comes to the phase 1 approved facilities or the projects, they are yet to begin the commercial production. So, ultimately the returns on the initial chip making bit, it actually remains legally unproven, and that is what this complete editorial, it talks about. Now, this is quite important because when it comes to the semiconductor mission, this was launched in India in December 2021. Now, this was under the Ministry of Engineering, Electronics and IT, that is METI, and this is the part of basically Make in India or Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, this is quite important because ultimately semiconductor manufacturing is dominated by only few players in the globe. We have in Taiwan TSMC, which is basically the advanced logic. Then we have in the Netherlands, we have ASML, that is basically it is in the EUV lithography equipment. And in South Korea, we have Samsung, which is working for the memory of the semiconductors. Now, this is quite important because when it comes to EUV technology or the lithography that we are talking about, this is basically the extreme ultraviolet lithography, which is a cutting edge chip fabrication technology, which is only a few nations or the firms they possess. Like for example, Netherlands, ASML, or even the adopters like we have in Japan, they currently master this technology, and India is nowhere near this technology when it comes to the semiconductor mission. So this is quite important because when it comes to the semiconductor, there are various stages, various stages where we manufacture these semiconductors, where ultimately there is the, there is IP and the chip design, where we design the complete chip. This is where we are, excelling, or India excels into the chip design and not the fabrication. Now, first you design the chip, and then what happens is that there is fab or fabrication. Fabrication is where with the components, they are assembled together onto the chip design that had been already designed, and then there is the testing or the assembly as well, that is known as ATMP. So there are these stages which from where it happens. We have the chip design, fabrication and ATMP, but India is right now, when it comes to the value chain, we are targeting the chip design and not the fabrication or the ATMP as well. So this is quite important where India's semiconductor, it lies, and where we should focus. We should focus more upon fabrication or fab, and even the ATMP, where we should focus on the assembly and even testing also. Now, over here, coming to the next question is where the Supreme Court will examine the plea for recognition of intersex persons as a distinct class. Now, there is a petition that had been filed in the Supreme Court, and here it actually seeks responses. The Supreme Court have sought the responses from the center and the states on this plea, which actually seeks to recognize the intersex persons. Now, this is quite important because when it comes to intersex persons, they are quite different from the transgenders. So ultimately, when it comes to the intersex persons, they are basically the people who are born with the congenital variations in the sex characteristics. So this is because of the chromosomal imbalance, and ultimately that leads to the intersex person, where we have the differences of the sex development because of the chromosomal the imbalance, and this is known as differences of sex development or DSD as well. So over here, this petition, it actually seeks that they should be provided with a distinct or a different categorization that should be there. So what is intersex person? Like I have said, intersex person are basically which are born with congenital variations or the congenital variations in the sex characteristics. Like for example, there is the 6 chromosomes which are there. So if there is addition or duplication of the sex chromosome, so there are the people which are born with the different sex characteristics, and they are called as the intersex person. Now, this petition actually seeks a direction from the Union government as well to frame a separate statutory guidelines within the 6 months for the recognition, protection and affirmative support of these intersex person. And also the petitioner over here, it distinguished the intersex identity, that is a biological reality that is present right from the birth, from the gender identity. Now, gender identity, it formed after the after the birth, but at the same time, yes, is this a genetic issue? Yes. Alright, so because ultimately this is because of the chromosomal variations or genetic variations, so we have this as a genetic issue. All right. So ultimately over here, the petitioner, they have distinguished between both of them, because intersex identity is which is present right at the birth. All right. But at the same time, when it comes to the gender identity, that is formed later on. So when it comes to the transgenders, so that is a kind of identity, or when it comes to LGBTQ, so that is a kind of identity that gets developed later on in the life. But when it comes to intersex identity, it is present right at the birth. So the plea also seeks that there should be a National Medical Protocol Committee for the intersex care that should be established within 3 months, and it will address the forced medical interventions and the related harms which are there for the intersex persons as well. Now this is quite important because ultimately this pertains to a very remarkable judgment that was passed by the Supreme Court, that is Nalsa versus Union of India in 2014. Now in this judgment that was passed in 2014, it actually recognized the transgender persons' right to self-identification under the articles, that is 14 and 15, the right to equality under right to freedom, which is provided under Article 19, and right to life and personal liberty as well under Article 21. So ultimately, where it comes to this case is not the same, but it actually is seeking a parallel or distinct framework for the intersex person as well. Now there was another bill that was passed by the Parliament, that is Transgender Person Protection of Rights Act 2019, which actually covers the transgender person. Alright, but at the same time, there is no specific address to the distinct medical or the legal needs of the intersex individuals. And that is what you have to understand, that there is a difference between intersex and transgender. Intersex is basically the biological sex characteristics that is at the birth, which is different from the male or females. Alright, at the same time, when it comes to transgender, it relates to the gender identity that differs from the sex assigned at the birth. So that is the difference between intersex and the transgenders that we talk about. Now coming to the next one, it is about WICO, that is where China have pitched for the AI governance model for the global south. Now this is quite important because China have launched the WICO, or World Artificial Intelligence Cooperation Organization. Now this will be based in Shanghai, and this was launched with 29 of the other countries, mostly which are from Asia, Africa and Latin America. Now this is quite important because here the President Xi Jinping, he have pitched that it will be a platform for the global south, where they will jointly oppose the overstretching the national security concept in AI. Now national security concept in AI, where China is directly it is indicating towards US. Alright, so it is a critique of the US tech giants or the securitization, and here China have pledged that there will be 5,000 of the AI training or seminar opportunities for the developing countries over the period of next 5 years, and there will be joint AI application cooperation centers as well that will be there with the ASEAN and the African Union and with the BRICS as well. Now it is quite important to note over here that India, although it has sent its joint secretary level delegation to the Shanghai summit, it is basically absent when it comes to the WICO's founding member list. Unlike other BRICS nations which are there, we have the Brazil, we have the China, even we have the Russia and the South Africa which were present. So this is quite important when it comes to the complete perspective or the launch of WICO. Now this is quite important because ultimately when it comes to the complete reason, so there is the China's need where it has to counter the Western's narratives on the AI security risk, and even to expand the influence over the global south technology market or the ecosystem through the intensifying or intensification of the US-China tech rivalry. Now this is quite important because ultimately India was absent from WICO. It signals that there had been strategic caution that had been taken by India, and also it is about India's own AI ambitions as well, where actually it is India AI mission that I am talking about. Now this is also important for the world because actually this fragments the complete global AI governance into the competing blocks. Now we will have different blocks that will be there where it will be led by either US or China or by UN led as well. Now there are the opportunities that this WICO it presents. The opportunity is for the smaller and the developing nations where they will have the access to the low cost AI training and the infrastructure which is otherwise unaffordable to them. But at the same time there is a risk, and the risk is of the technological dependency on the Chinese platform, and even there is the ideological alignment concerns as well. This will also lead to fragmentation of the complete global bloc, which will weaken the global consensus on the AI safety or the ethics standards as well. And these are the risks that we are talking about. Now over here you can see that we have the different, this is about the semicon. You can see this later on. When it comes to the framework, so we have the different framework that we are talking about. There is EU AI Act, which is basically the led by European Union, which is where we are talking about, or the core philosophy is right-based and regulation-heavy framework that had been provided. Now over here, because of this AI Act, good morning Apex, because of this AI Act, European Union actually wants to protect the citizen privacy and even the ethics as well. Then there is US model also, where it is basically market-led and innovation-heavy. Now here the US maintain proprietary corporate dominance that we have seen recently in the case of Anthropic, where the US government have said that you should not move ahead with the projects and you should not give the advanced projects to the globe, and that should be mandated, or that should be only accessible in the US market. So again, over here this is quite important that US is maintaining the proprietary corporate dominance when it comes to the AI. Then we have the WICO, which will be led by China, where this will be state-led and anti-Western securitization that we are talking about, and it will attract the global south and it will counter the US influence, and that is why this is quite important. Now coming to the next news that is over here, this is about Manasbal. Now Manasbal Lake, that is located in Srinagar or in Kashmir's Gandarbal district. Now over here this is quite important because remember that this is the deepest freshwater lake that is there. So this is important for your prelims, that you must remember the deepest freshwater lake in India is Manasbal, which is located in Jammu and Kashmir. Then there is another news for your prelims as well. Again, this is quite important because over here it says that the Union government have appointed Harjeet Singh Grewal, chairperson of the NCM, or the National Commission for Minorities. Now remember, when it comes to NCM is basically, it is not a constitutional authority, or it is not a constitutional body. Tanmoy Jai Hind. Alright, so it is not a constitutional body, but it is a statutory body. Statutory body, that means it has been established by the law. Alright, and this law was passed in 1993. So it was established in 1993, and over here there are total, there should be the sanction strength is 7 members, and when it comes to chairperson, the chairperson or the chairman, there has to be chairman or chairperson who is appointed for 3 years. Please remember the tenure is 3 years, and then we have the vice chairperson, and then there are 5 members that can be appointed. Right now, the current strength is 4 members of the NCM that is there, and again, this is quite important because in your prelims, you are asked about the constitutional and extra constitutional bodies. So it relates with constitutional versus extra constitutional bodies, and again, that is why this is quite important. All right. So these are the important news. And now the time for the questions that we always discuss. Alright, the first question that you can see on your screen is, consider the following statements regarding India Semiconductor Mission 2.0 or Semicon 2.0. It reduces direct silicon fabrication capital subsidies to 40% while expanding support to upstream specialized equipments and chemicals and gases. Second, the duration of the Semicon 2.0 has been extended to a 10-year cycle to align with global high-performance computing investment. Then we have, it places significant emphasis on scaling advanced packaging infrastructure like OSAT and ATMP to integrate faster into global supply chain. So which of the statement given above is correct? Tell me, what will be the right answer? Right, the correct answer is no, Reshma, it is C. Alright, the second statement is incorrect over here, but first and third, they are true, and thereby the answer will be C. That will be the correct answer. Alright, yes, it is C. Now coming to the next question, we have matched the following clauses of Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishtan Bill with their respective regulatory mechanism. Clause 11.4 mandates, clause 11.4, clause 12 and 47. Then we have mandate state governments NOC before colleges can grant degrees independently. Then allows the state universities to establish off campuses as per the state legislative laws, and empowers the central government to suspend or supersede the regulatory commission. So which will be the right answer? Third statement is right, Reshma. So what will be the right answer here? Right, here all are correctly matched, so of course it is ABC, that is A, that is the right answer. Now, coming to the next question that we have, it is assertion and reason. We have assertion A. The Election Commission of India has the authority to remove names of duplicate, deceased and migrated electors during the special intensive revision of the voter list. Reason: the Election Commission is a primarily constitutional authority to make final citizenship determination under Articles 9, 10, 11 and 12 of the Constitution. So we have reason, that is false, but assertion is true, and that comes to C, that is A is true but R is false. Right, C is the answer. Then question number 4, consider the following statements regarding the legal position on judicial and ministerial resignations. The first one is: a High Court judge resignation under Article 217 is complete upon receipt by the President and does not require the formal acceptance. Second, a pending inquiry under the Judges Inquiry Act 1968 automatically lapses once a judge submits their resignation. Then, under the proposed 130th Constitutional Amendment Bill, a minister must resign automatically if they are detained in custody for 30 consecutive days, regardless of conviction. Sorry. So we have the next question, and the right answer here will be, why B? It will be C, Reshma. The first one is right, that is High Court's resignation, that is under the Article 217, it's complete upon receipt by the President. There is no formal acceptance that is required, and that was laid down by Supreme Court in its 1978 judgment. Alright, then the second one is incorrect, because we have seen that there was a inquiry that was pending in the case of Justice Verma. Alright, when it comes to Justice Verma, so there was inquiry that was pending already. Alright, it has not submitted its report, and then the judge have submitted the resignation before the inquiry could be completed. But still, that inquiry did not lapse automatically, and thereby the second is incorrect. We have the third, that is correct, where the proposed 130th Constitutional Amendment Bill, here the minister, he must resign automatically if they are detained for the custody of 30 consecutive days. But over here, when it comes to the JPC, we have seen that JPC have made a recommendation, and the recommendation is that instead of automatically being resigned, over here they have said that they should be suspended. But it is, again, when it comes to, this is the recommendation of the JPC, but it is not actually under the proposed bill. So therefore, when it comes to the answer will be C, that is 1 and 3 only. Now, coming to the next question, it is: consider the following statements regarding the rights and medical protocol for intersex person in India. The first one is: intersex status is a congenital biological condition present at birth, distinct from self-perceived gender identity developed post-puberty. Second, the Transgender Person Protection of Rights Act 2019 provides a comprehensive national protocol banning cosmetic surgeries on intersex infants. Then, the Supreme Court of India has issued notice on a PIL seeking the creation of National Medical Protocol Committee for the intersex care. So, what will be the correct answer here? We have the next question, question number 5, that is in front of us. The correct answer is C, that is true, Shinobi. So we have the right answer because second is incorrect, and we have first and third that are true, and that is because there is no comprehensive protocol that is there. That is why this plea had been filed in the Supreme Court. Now, these are the questions that you can try for your mains examination. The first one is, the tension surrounding the proposed VBSA bill 2025 highlights the delicate balance between the central standard setting and the state level administrative autonomy in the India's education sector. Critically examine or evaluate this statement keeping in the view of the JPC recommendation and the constitutional provisions. Then question number 2 for your GS paper 3, India's Semiconductor Mission 2.0 moves beyond attracting capital intensive fabrication projects to building a resilient domestic packaging, material and design supply chain. Discuss the shift and analyze the key resource and policy hurdles India must address to achieve the high-tech self-reliance. So these are the 2 questions that you can practice for your mains examination related to today's news that we have seen in the Hindu. So that would be all in today's session. Thank you very much guys for joining me over here on the platform of StudyIQ. But let me remind you once again that we have the Resolution P2I badge, which is basically a GS Foundation badge based upon the SMART framework, where we have the structured classes, we have the mentorship, assessment, revision and test series all combined into one, because every of the pillars that we have here, the 5 pillars, they are required for your holistic preparation. And you can enroll into the batch by using the code that is BRS Live, that will fetch you the maximum discount onto the platform. So that would be all. Thank you very much guys for joining me over here. Thank you very much Shinobi, Reshma, Apex Knight and Rajanish as well, and the others who have joined me for the complete analysis of the Hindu. I will see you on Monday at the same time, that is at 9:30 a.m. for the complete analysis of the Hindu on Monday. So that would be all, but do not forget to leave a like, to share the session with your friends who are preparing for the civil services, and even subscribe to our channel so that you do not miss any of the further Hindu analysis. So that would be all. Thank you. Bye bye. Take care and Jai Hind. Thank you.